We go.
Fantastic,
Hello,
thank you.
everyone. This has been a really interesting conference, but I think it's been a bit heavy. It's a lot of content, a lot of information. This is going to be a slightly different, I think, than some of the other presentations, but I hope you'll find it interesting. So before we start, can I just ask us, I know we've had a break recently, but it's the afternoon. You may have self-care things that you do when you're at your desk, but whatever those are, they might be rolling your shoulders, just checking in with the back of your neck or your jaw or your forehead, wherever it is that you hold tension. You can just, this is about embodied practice, so it shouldn't be a surprise that I'm saying whatever it is, if you have some things you do to protect yourself throughout the day, to just give yourself a moment to do those. I'm showing you a few that I use throughout the day. And I know this is very much focused on technical aspects of teaching and learning. And what you might be surprised is that the story I'm going to walk through and the concerns that I'm going to raise, all of them have been enabled. This conversation has been enabled, mediated through digital technology. And we'll come to that towards the close of my presentation. So if you're thinking, what's this got to do with our topic? Just hang in there. I'm going to try to go through it fairly quickly because what I'd like to do is ask the administrators to enable breakout rooms for what would be the last 5 minutes of my time talking, and for us to go into small groups at that point and have a chance to just reflect on a few questions. So my name is Dr. Beth Cross, and I lead on the professional doctorate at UWS. But what I'm sharing with you today was very much developed with Dr. Liisa-Ravna Finbog, who's a Sami academic and works with Norway's national body responsible for curating and programming active arts in public space. And she also works with, excuse me, the creator of discursive programming in Munchmuseet. So Liisa Finbog, when we work together, when I work with my Indigenous colleagues, we start by place recognition. And place recognition is not only recognizing a place, but all the relationships within that. And this is one of the things that we may want to think about as we seek to change practice. Do we make time for that in the work that we're doing? How do we make time for that? And what does it mean? So for Liisa-Ravna, when she makes a place acknowledgement, this is the place that she's acknowledging. It's very important to her and her family. And I think we might think that, oh, place recognition, maybe that's more pertinent to people in Australia or the Americas. However, those places are connected to our place. It's a little more messy to think about, well, what is our place? What resourced it? Where did those resources come from around the world? And also, how is our place? Also, how does it have a heritage from the first peoples that inhabited it? So just a minute to recognize that we have a place and relationships that sustain us, support us, and to whom we have a sustaining and supporting duty. Say a little bit about where I come from. I was raised in the Great Plains of America, and so I am the daughter of settlers who stole land. But this also did mean that I had a quite close relationship to the land as I grew up. I guess I've seen myself as a researcher stroke activist since my early adulthood. And because my professional work has been in community development, the work I do as an academic is very much framed by that. How am I working in a community? How does it need to develop? So I guess I've kind of seen myself as occupying a liminal space in academia. And I don't know how you would label yourself or how you would position yourself, But many people who want to make change, they can either see themselves as external to it, outside the system, maybe throwing stones, or they might choose to work within the system to change it. And then you might think of yourself as someone who's growing alternatives and maybe committed to the long march. But it's important to, as we're situating what we do, particularly with Sustainable Development Goals, to think about how do we sit within the system. So I'm going to invite you now, as part of this presentation, to engage in something that's a little more embodied than just the place acknowledgement. And you can do this within any class that you lead, any meeting that you have. And if it is a way of working into how we normally work, ways of knowing and ways of being that are more respectful and in conversation with indigeneity. So some of you may be familiar with Robin Wall Kimmerer's work, Braiding Sweetgrass. She has a chapter in there which is an alternative pledge of allegiance, not pledge of allegiance to an institution or a nation, but to our relatives, which we share this world with. And there's a simplified version of that, which I'm going to invite you to just kind of think, walk with me. If you can, please stand. I'd encourage you to maybe bounce your ankles or your heels up and down. Kind of gives you a sense of how you are grounded wherever you are, and the wonderful job your feet do to balance you. Now I invite you to take a breath and think of all those beneath us that support us in the ground. And then to take a breath, maybe open your arms and think about the flow around you and the connection within that. And think in gratitude of those relational connections. And then another breath and thinking to the air and to the creatures and relatives and the amazing flow in the air. And maybe think about how that inspires us. So I've put here just a blessing that is a riff on an ancient Celtic blessing. And that is part of the work of indigeneity, is to not just preserve and aspect things that have gone before us, but to ask the question, how do we make those live and real in our time now? So what I want the kind of focus of today, maybe the learning content, is to critique and problematize our Sustainable Development Goals, and that as a frame. So much earlier than the Sustainable Development Goals, the Earth Charter was published in 2002, but work on it had been going on for a decade before that. And this is a very different frame for thinking about our relationships with the world. And at the core is respect and care for the community of life. So that's only SDG 11. But within this framework, it's at the heart and center of the framework. So there's been a lot of questions asked by many people from the global south, from the majority world. Have we lost some of what was there in the Earth Charter and how the SDG goals have been framed? So in 2007, there was another important UN document that we can use to analyze the SDG goals, and that is the UN 2007 Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. You can read that in detail, but what I want to draw your attention to is a key part of its framing are these verbs: affirming, reaffirming. So this is the continuous present. It's not something you do and are done with, but it is something that is a constant from past, present to future. It aligns you to think of those as together. We move to the one of the framing documents of the Sustainable Development Goals. This language is superseded by a document that is in the passive voice And in the past, it was noted, was affirmed, rather than something that is an ongoing concern and an ongoing affirmation. And if we fast forward to how sustainable development goals are reported, this is just an example of the infographics that play a very important role in the discourse of sustainable development goals. And I'm just drawing our attention to this one. What it's supposed to be talking about is the quality of education. So how is that measured? It's measured in quantitative metrics. So I think what I'm just trying to say here is there are very many different ways to engage with this. But when we arrive at these kind of metrics, my concern is that we have left the heart of the Earth Charter some way behind. It's kind of, earlier someone was talking about greenwashing. This is another way in which discourse is molded to different concerns and different priorities. So what would those different priorities be? Well, one of the terms that Liisa-Ravna Finbog talks about is gulmedachi, which is the world as kinship. And that is a term that maybe we might want to think about in terms of reappraising how we work with the Sustainable Development Goals, how we envision our teaching and learning relationships. Significant to this is that kind of thinking, not only what would generations past, how would they see and understand what it is we are teaching? Also, 7 generations to the future, what would be the impact on them? And to try to develop a practice of thinking with those generations. So you're kind of, if you could say, that's maybe a vertical line that you're thinking with. And then the horizontal line would be to really see all those dynamic aspects of our world as somehow our relatives, and that they speak to us, they have an active, agen-tive presence that we should engage with, which is a little bit different than often the last speaker was talking about. There are psychological studies, but most of them are from seats of learning that have been quite disengaged with nature for a century, rather than taking from the perspective of people who've been living much more closely in a much more sustainable way with their environments. So my question then comes to, if we are going to take Indigenous knowledges and Indigenous practices seriously, we really do need to focus on this making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. And I would encourage us, when we're thinking about SDG 4, to and I was really impressed with the presentation, the keynote presentation, Dundee and Angus. It seems that's exactly what they're doing, is taking those conversations out to the community and having them with the community, so that whatever is being taught and learned, it doesn't sideline those voices. And I think that does go a long way to helping us re-indigenize our practice, which is a prompt or a provocation. Really, it's all I'm asking you to do. So I wanted to share with you a few practices that have been digitally mediated, that we've developed, my Indigenous colleagues and myself, to think differently. And what this has meant is, when we want to explore a topic, is to not stay seated in front of our screens, but to take that topic for a walk, and to give each person quite a bit of time to talk, to have silence, to think about something, to talk again without being interrupted. So they have that space to walk, to notice, to have both silence and talking with breath while they work through that. And then to notice how having that conversation in the environment we are walking through may help us see it differently, and to harvest or to notice things that are speaking to us that may have a metaphoric wisdom, and to bring those back to our space where we do our work, And instead of starting by a outline or a flow chart that's very linear constructed, to start with a process that relates some of these components together to name the meaning and the concerns we have. And here you see 3 different examples of that process. The last one is Jennifer Markides. And as an Indigenous academic, I think she is much more comfortable letting symbols speak for themselves. As you can see from the other 2, which are mine, I have things that represent my world, but with them, I'm writing, and I'm writing into those spaces. I'm looking at the spaces my web or my shambo makes, and I'm thinking, how can they represent different pieces of the puzzle that I want to name and write about as I work. So the thing I wanted to stress about this is, because both of these people live very far from me, when we've gone on these shambling walks, we've done it with a phone. We've done it with a WhatsApp, and we don't have the video turned on because that would, again, focus you on a screen instead of your environment. What we do is we walk so that we have the audio. And then at key turning points, when one of us is finished with a question, before we consider another question, or before we hand over to the other person, we look around our environment, and often our eyes caught by something maybe we wouldn't have seen, we wouldn't have noticed had we not been having this conversation. And we take a picture and share that picture. So when we do that, the person that we're having the conversation with gets this momentary focused image from the other person. So as well as hearing them talk through, they get this one glimpse of their environment. And what it does is it is a kind of a digital way of harvesting. That means we're not extracting anything from the environment, but we're continuing to think with it when we return to our desks. So how are we doing for time? Can someone let me know how much time we have left? Oops.
You've got about 3 minutes left for presenting, and then there's 5 minutes for questions.
Okay, I'm sorry I kind of overran. If you have enabled that, what I would, if it's possible, if we can just go into breakout rooms for those 3 minutes, and
Sure.
these are the questions you could talk with your person about.
Okay,
I'm kind of thinking of that wider frame and Indigenous concerns as you do so.